Hello, I'm Jake. I'm a local baker from a pretty quiet neighborhood where nothing ever happened. As soon as I graduated from high school, I ended up in this job. I couldn't continue studying since I had to support my parents financially, and, to tell the truth, I didn't feel ready for great things either. My job was honest. Boring, but honest. Still, I always tried to keep a positive attitude. But let's not focus on me. Let's focus on my sister. Emily was the pride of the family. We were all excited about her future. In a few weeks, she would be off to college, the first in our family to achieve something so great. It was no wonder. She had worked hard, and all of us, including my parents and me, were proud of her. Emily was always the bright one. From a young age, she excelled at everything she did. She won math contests, was captain of the debate team, and even was elected student council president in high school. My parents always talked about her with that twinkle in their eyes that they couldn't hide. I was very happy for her too. I always told myself that even though I hadn't achieved much, at least I was a good brother, supporting Emily in everything she did. As the day of her departure approached, the house was filled with preparations and goodbyes. My parents would host dinners with friends and family to celebrate, and I would join in the general merriment. After all, she was my little sister, and I was happy to see her happy and excited about her new adventure. Unfortunately, everything would begin to take a rather dark turn. One night, while I was working at the bakery, Emily sent me a message on Snapchat. It said she had received something weird from my account. It puzzled me, as I didn't remember sending her anything. My Snapchat account was abandoned. I didn't even use the app. The message she received was a threat. Someone had told her that she would never make it to college alive. That message seemed like the scariest message I had ever seen in my life. Had I left Snapchat open at a friend's house? Maybe I had been hacked. I quickly replied, telling her it wasn't me. I tried to calm her down, saying that these things happen all the time. She pretended to be calm so I would stay calm. But I knew her. She was not well. The next few days were weird. Emily started receiving more messages from my account, each one more disturbing than the last. The messages were very direct and scary. Some said that no matter what, she would die. Others said that she would be shot and that they would look her in the eye later as her life was lost. Emily, who had always been strong and confident, began to appear nervous and scared. At first, my parents were angry with me, thinking it was me, but they soon understood that this was something much more serious than a prank. Someone was stalking her on Snapchat. Emily, who was about to leave the family home to start a new life, began to isolate herself. She blocked me from Snapchat, but within hours, she started getting messages from accounts she didn't follow. The problem continued on Instagram, WhatsApp, and even Facebook. I understood everything that was happening. Someone wanted to isolate her, to take her out of the networks, and they were succeeding. The sparkle in her eyes was fading, and her enthusiasm for college was fading. Whoever was doing this was not only very clever, but also very cruel. As the days went by, the situation got worse. Emily confessed to me one night that she sometimes saw a person watching her outside the house, through the window. This person never showed his face, but could see a part of her. He had a beard and looked much bigger than us. It was a terrifying person. The situation only got worse. Every time I was gone, she would lock herself in a room with the curtains closed and the lights on. My parents and I called the police. I told them what was going on, about the messages and about the man Emily had seen. The officers took notes and asked a few questions, but in the end, couldn't do much. They checked the house and the surrounding area, but found nothing suspicious. Still, they promised to patrol our street more often. The night that changed everything, my parents were out of town on a work trip. Emily and I were left home alone. Suddenly, the lights went out completely. The house was pitch black. I could hear Emily holding her breath, paralyzed with fear. I turned on the flashlight on my phone, illuminating the living room. I tried to calm her down, saying it was probably a power outage. Then we heard footsteps. Someone was inside the house. Through the darkness, we distinguished a figure moving in the courtyard. It was a man, dirty and disheveled, who seemed to be looking for something, or someone. Before I could do anything, I saw him move toward the security camera we had installed at the entrance. In one fell swoop, he smashed it. I told Emily to go lock us in her room, and she complied and went with me. We both locked ourselves in. Emily took out her phone and tried to call the police, but she couldn't. Do you know why? because I took the phone out of her hands. She looked at me, confused, and I started laughing out loud. It wasn't a laugh of relief or nervousness, and I certainly hadn't lost my mind. It was a laugh of happiness. I had her right where I wanted her. I confessed everything to her. It was I who slowly drove her crazy, who made her believe she was being stalked. It gave me pleasure to watch the perfect Emily crumble, her fairy tale life turn into a nightmare. I enjoyed every second of watching that spoiled brat in a golden cradle panic, begging me to help her. As usual, Big Brother had to postpone his life for her. I paid that bum to terrorize her, to make sure her fear was real. I thought everything through carefully, and it all came out perfectly. Maybe my parents would be proud to see that I am smart. And you know what the best part of it all is? You, who are listening to this story, thought I was the good guy. You thought I was worried about the brat, right? You ate up every lie I told while you thought a hacker or a bum was stalking my sister on Snapchat. Emily, see this? You know what this is, Emily? This is the end. This is the end of you. Why? You were always my best friend. I always trusted you. Why are you doing this to me? Because I am no one's shadow. The shot echoed through the house. Emily fell to the floor, her limp body on the blood-soaked carpet. I stood there, watching her life slip away, just as I had promised her on Snapchat. With the last of her energy left, she looked at me, crying. Hey, don't look at me like that. You should be happy. For the next few days, you'll be the star of the family again. Before she died, I emptied the magazine in her face. I leaned over her and whispered in her ear, even though I knew she could no longer hear me. What good has it done you to be so special, little sister? Then I got up and opened the door. The tramp, that poor devil I had paid to do his part, was waiting. I handed him the gun and a handful of bills. Get lost. He simply obeyed me and left. I stayed in the house, surrounded by darkness, knowing exactly what I was supposed to do next. After enjoying a few seconds of peace, I picked up the phone and called the police. I told them that someone had broken into the house, that the man pointed the gun at us, and that, in full view of me, he shot and killed her. I got away with it. No one suspected me. The homeless man was never arrested, but the blame fell on him anyway, since he was caught on camera before he destroyed them, as I told you. The man sure is lying in a ditch drunk, but they think he is a dangerous hacker who became obsessed with a successful and happy girl. Today, I have a normal life. I got married. I have a family. No one around me suspects what I did. And here I am, telling this story, not because I feel guilty or because I want to redeem myself. No, I am telling it because it amuses me. Because I know that neither you nor anyone else can do anything about it. If you ever see me on the street, you won't recognize me. I'm just a good man who sells bread. A man who lost his sister, but who is positive and does everything he can to make his parents happy. Today, I am the favorite son, and there is not a day that goes by that I don't tell anecdotes about my sister and cry in front of my parents saying how much I miss her.
It all started as a dumb game. Nothing more than a distraction to pass the time between classes. I remember downloading Snapchat because everyone in college was using it. Sharing photos, videos, filters, all of that had become part of the routine in college. I was looking for filters for photos. Then I found it. A new Shrek filter. Everyone in college was a Shrek fan, and how could we not be? At the time, Shrek was the global phenomenon. The only thing that bothered me was that the filter was incredibly sensitive. You could apply it anywhere, and Shrek's face would appear even on distant objects. Not only that, but sometimes I would even apply the filter in places where there was absolutely nothing and no one in the air. Anyway, it was the best designed and the funniest Shrek Snapchat filter. It may sound very childish, and it is, but something about taking pictures with the Shrek filter was just too much fun for me. It was when Mike, my roommate, had that accident that things started to get weird. It was a night like any other. We were both in the room, him at his desk, me lying on the bed with my cell phone in hand. Suddenly, I heard a loud knock. I turned around and saw Mike on the floor, unconscious. His chair was upside down, and his laptop had fallen to the side. It all happened in just a matter of seconds. I ran to him and shook him to see if he would react, but he didn't. I called 911 while trying to wake him up, but he didn't respond. It looked like he had fallen and hit his head, but something didn't fit. The way he was down, how does a chair fall backward like that? That night, they took him to the hospital, and I was left alone in the room. The doctors said he had suffered a very bad blow to the head, and they would have to do more tests. I usually stay up late, but this time, I wasn't going to be able to sleep. I'd been shocked by what, out of the blue, had happened to my roommate. The next day, I returned to the room after class and found it quiet. Mike always got out of class before me, so it was strange to find the room empty. But he hadn't come back yet, and I don't know when he would. It felt a little uncomfortable, but I tried to shake that feeling, telling myself it was just my mind playing tricks on me after Mike's accident. But then, the strange thing started. Mike's bedside table behind me fell out of nowhere. I was petrified with fear, but I also noticed that the window was open. Surely that was the reason why the bedside table had fallen. I stopped to close the window and sat back down to study. As much as I tried to read, it was impossible. All the tension and the shock had knocked me out of my mind. I wanted to distract myself a bit, so at that moment I thought of something. I would use Snapchat to take a picture of the fallen candlestick. When Mike came back, he would freak out for sure. I took out my cell phone and started snapping in that direction without realizing that I had the Shrek filter on. When I realized it, I was about to take the filter off when I realized something else. The filter was back in the air, but this time in a different way. The filter was frozen, as if someone was standing next to the candlestick, staring at me. It was perfectly placed 2 meters above the floor, and it was moving as if it was breathing, as if it was placed on a living thing. I froze, not knowing what to do. This couldn't be real. Maybe it was just a glitch in the app. But when that face began to approach me in human form, as if walking, I knew it wasn't my imagination. This wasn't a simple software bug. Something was there. Something my eyes couldn't see, but the filter could. The face approached so fast that I didn't have time to react. I dropped the phone in a panic and it fell to the floor. When I looked in front of me with the naked eye, there was nothing there. Suddenly, I heard a noise to my left. I turned quickly and saw that a book had fallen from the shelf. There was no one else in the room, but I felt a cold draft run down my back. I tried to ignore it, but the knocking continued. Louder, more insistent, but now it was obvious that something was going on. My first and only impulse was to run from the room, but if there was something there that I could see, it wouldn't let me go. I knew what I had to do. I plucked up my courage and grabbed my phone off the floor. I opened Snapchat and, without thinking, activated the Shrek filter again. This time, I pointed it at the shelf to see if I could detect anything. There, standing next to the bookshelf, was a figure. I couldn't see it clearly, but I knew it was there because the filter had detected it. Shrek's face hovered right there where its head should be, but it was much larger, more grotesque. The figure stood there, motionless, watching me. I tried to calm myself down and think that this could be a good thing. If the figure was there, it meant that there was nothing to stop me from leaving behind. I couldn't be more wrong. I pointed the camera at the door and saw another silhouette, about the same height, standing just inside the entrance. That's when it hit me. There were at least 5 figures in the room with me. Before I could react, the figure on the shelf moved. It was so fast, too fast. It lunged at me with brutal force, and I felt as if a wave of energy had hit me in the chest, throwing me against the wall. The pain was immediate and wrenching. My head hit the wall with such force that I thought I would pass out. But fear kept me conscious. Fear that if I closed my eyes, those things would kill me. I tried to get up, but my legs wouldn't respond. The figure was on top of me. In a last desperate effort, I reached for my phone, which had fallen nearby. I picked it up and pointed it at the figure. Maybe the filter could tell me where it was coming from. Maybe I could avoid it. Today, I think about it and regret having picked up that camera. When I filmed, I realized that the other figures were also coming towards me, slowly. They were about to kill me. Suddenly, I felt a hand choking me. I was losing my breath rapidly. I tried to punch in the direction where the figure was, but I couldn't hit anything. Suddenly, the figure stopped choking me, picked me up with his other hand, and threw me out the window. The glass shattered as I went through it. The impact on the ground was brutal. It felt as if every bone in my body broke at the same time. I screamed in pain, but I was alive. Something neither I nor surely the invisible figure considered would happen. Everything became a blur after that. I vaguely remember the sound of sirens and the flashing lights of the ambulance. I was taken to the hospital, and from then on, I only remember more pain. The doctors told me that I had suffered multiple fractures and that I would be lucky to walk normally again. When I finally became conscious again, I saw Mike in the bed next to me. He was awake, but his expression was one of pure terror. He told me that while I was with him, he felt a very strong impulse that pulled him down, that it wasn't just an accident. Neither of us knew what happened, but the important thing was that now we were safe. We knew we couldn't go back to that room, so we asked for a room change, explaining that what we had experienced had been too traumatizing, although we didn't mention ghosts or spirits. I didn't want to go back to that room ever again, but Mike was encouraged to go with me to pick up his things, and incidentally, some of mine. He would go in with 2 friends for safety and get out as fast as he could. I waited outside the room while Mike and his friends went in. Time passed slowly, and when I realized they had been in there too long, I knew something was wrong. I pulled my wheelchair up to the door and opened it. Mike and his friends were sprawled across the room. Their bodies were twisted at impossible angles, with broken bones and blood everywhere. Mike's eyes were open. His neck broken. The horror on his face was the last thing he had felt before he died. Terrified, not knowing how to react, I pulled out my camera and opened Snapchat. All the shadows were still inside the room, standing, looking in my direction, inviting me in. I left that place as fast as my chair would let me, and soon after, I left the university as well. That was also the last time I ever used a Snapchat filter or any cell phone camera. Everyone thinks I'm crazy, but I know the truth. You never know when, because you want to take a picture with a funny filter, that you might be sealing your death sentence.
It's been 2 years since this incident, but I can remember every detail of this story like it was yesterday. I was 17, and as a teenager, I wasn't really into social apps. I was the kind of teen you'd see with headphones on all the time, but as time passed, I guess I changed. The more friends I made, the more the need for these social apps became. Instagram came first, then Twitter, and then finally Snapchat. At first, I wasn't really enthusiastic about the app, but eventually I grew to love it, and before I knew it, I was sending up to 16 snaps a day. Little did I know that, in the coming weeks, this app would lead to the worst experience of my life. I can remember the first message I received. I was in class with my friends and we were talking about girl stuff when my phone buzzed. At the time, I didn't realize it because I was really into the conversation. I'm guessing my friend Lucy saw it, so she called my attention to it. "Claire, when did you start talking to boys we don't know about?" I was taken aback by this statement, and the whole group became intrigued. "What are you talking about?" I replied. Then she held my phone up and said, "Who's user 22? I quickly took my phone and saw the notification. I had received a voice note on Snapchat from someone called user 22. The person wasn't added as my friend, so that was odd. "I don't know who this is," I replied. "Come on, spill the beans," they said. But I kept saying that I was telling the truth and I really didn't know who it was. "How do you know it's a boy anyway?" I asked Lucy. "Because no girl uses a name as bland as user 22. Plus, you don't really talk to anyone apart from us." Deep down, I knew that was true. Even if I did start using social apps, I still only talked to my friends on it. So I guess I wasn't as social as I thought. I finally decided to play the message. I put on my headphones and pressed play. At first, it was nothing but silence for 30 seconds. Then I heard the crackling of a camera. Like the sound it makes when taking a picture, followed by a loud guttury scream of a word, "Chait." The word sounded like someone who wasn't literate or someone who didn't know English well tried to pronounce the word chat. I was still in deep thought till my friends asked, "So what does it say?" So I took off my headphones and played the message. They too were in shock till Lucy started laughing. I remember asking her, "What's so funny?" And she said, "It's probably a silly trend. Don't you get it? The clicking of a camera when taking a photo, snap, followed by a loud voice screaming the word chat? Snapchat." At that moment, that was the only plausible explanation. And with all the new trends and challenges on social media, it seemed to make sense. We all shrugged it off and went on with our day. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right with that message. In the coming weeks, I kept on receiving the same message at odd times of the day. In the middle of the night, after showering, or when I'm just walking down the street with my friends. Lucy said it was a trend, but apparently, it was only me getting these weird messages. I tried to talk to the person by asking, "Who are you? What do you want from me?" But user 22 never responded. He or she just kept on sending the same voice note over and over. With time, I'd just started to ignore it, and I told myself it was probably a bot or a glitch. I also didn't tell my friends because it really wasn't hurting anyone. On April 15th, a day which I'd come to remember, my parents were out of town for the weekend, and I was sitting by the window reading a book and my phone buzzed. I picked it up and saw the same notification that I'd been seeing for weeks. Voice note from user 22. I don't know why, but I always played the message. Maybe I was waiting, hoping for it to be something different. I wasn't wearing my headphones, so I decided to play it out loud, and it was the exact same thing. Snap, Chait. But this time after playing the message, I froze. Maybe it was because I wasn't wearing my headphones, but I could have sworn that I heard the sound of a camera taking a picture coming from outside while I played the audio. I was really scared, so I slowly turned around, and right there, outside my window, was a hooded man holding a camera. I screamed and expected him to run away, but he ran right towards me. Upon reaching the window, he realized that it was locked, and he just stood there for 30 seconds staring at me. He then started screaming the word, "Chait! Chait! Chait!" at the top of his lungs. I just stood there completely frozen and confused. But what he did next scarred me for life. He started using his own head to repeatedly bash in my window. I saw the glass cut his cheek and forehead, but he just continued to destroy my window with his face. By now, his hood was off, and I could completely see his face. He looked like he was in his 60s. The hair on his head was tattered and in patches, and his teeth were black and rotten. I don't know why I didn't run. I don't know why I didn't call the police. I guess I couldn't. I was totally transfixed. I don't know if it was because of the fear, but all I could do was just stand there and take in the scene. My window finally broke, and the man whose face was completely disfigured let himself in. He held me by the shoulders and looked me in the eye. Up close, I could see his left eye was completely damaged, and numerous shards of glass were sticking out of his face. My mind had already gone to 1,000 places. I thought he was going to have his way with me and kill me. My mind screamed at me to do something, but my body fell limp. He opened his mouth and said the same words he'd been saying over and over. But this time, he said it in a calm voice, and it sounded like a question. Cheat? His breath was so rancid, it smelled like feces, but I still didn't say anything. He repeated it again, this time with a little agitation in his voice. Cheat! I finally mustered up some courage and said, I don't understand. And without thinking, he hit me hard on my face, and the force of the blow broke my nose. He then continued to shout, Cheat! 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 I remember at that moment my mind told me I was going to die, as I had already accepted it. Just then, I heard my name from outside. Claire? It's me, Miss Anderson, your neighbor. I heard a lot of noise and decided to check on you. Are you all right? I don't know where the strength came from, but I screamed. I screamed so hard, my lungs hurt. Claire, open the door right now. I heard Miss Anderson scream. The man, distracted by my neighbor, looked at the door, and I didn't hesitate to kick him between his legs. He screamed, and I ran for my room. I got in and locked the door, and it wasn't long till I heard footsteps from outside. I heard him banging the door, screaming. I stayed on the floor of my room, sobbing. It didn't take long before I started hearing police sirens. Soon after, I heard, It's the police! Followed by struggling from outside. Then everything died down. Then my door was broken down, and a female cop walked in and asked me, Are you okay? I looked outside, and I saw 2 cops holding down the man who had broken into my house. It's okay, we've restrained him, she said. I remember running into her arms and crying my heart out. After the incident, I was taken to a hospital. My parents then immediately rushed home after hearing the news. I went to the station to give a statement, and my dad demanded to know the identity of the man who did this to his daughter. We were told his name was Owen Connor. He was a war veteran. Before he joined the Army, he used to be a photographer. After the war, he suffered many brain injuries and PTSD, which made him really violent. He tried to get back in tune with his family, but he was isolated due to his rage and violent outbursts. After an incident where he got violent with one of his family members, he was put into a psychiatric ward. He stayed there for 6 years. There his condition deteriorated, and he lost many brain and speech functions. He escaped about 6 months ago, and has been on the loose ever since. I remember asking, why did he come after me though, and how did he get my Snapchat ID? They said they found a phone on him. Upon going through it, they found out he used the app Snapchat as a way to get back in contact with his family. They said he looked up the name of his daughter, Claire, and Snapchat's generic search results probably brought up my name, and he thought I was his daughter. They said he tracked me down using the Snap Map and followed me around for a while. Numerous pictures of me were also found on his camera. Even after all the therapy, I still remember that day, and every time I go to events, be it weddings or birthdays, I am always afraid of the words, say cheese. Because once I hear the snap of a camera, I vividly hear his voice still screaming at me. Cheat!